Ladies and gentlemen, we have yet another mccainisthrough cut and paste global warming video to debunk. This time it's her Australia's hottest summer on record. 2009, November 2009. Again, this user, and I pointed this out in my other responses to her, is focusing on one hot summer and not looking at the big picture. First, let's rattle off a few more cold spells which, using her reasoning, would prove her point wrong. Last month, Austria was set to have its earliest October snowfall ever. Idaho and western Montana were breaking cold records by several degrees, and that threatened the potato crop. Lastly, we have this. The average October temperature was 50.8 degrees Fahrenheit. Of 50.8 degrees Fahrenheit was 4 degrees Fahrenheit below the 20th century average and ranked as the third coolest based on preliminary data. Oh no, it's global cooling. Now let's start with some of the nonsense coming out of this video. At about the 1:15-minute mark, roughly, we're subjected to major hand-wringing over hotter temperatures, causing all kinds of diseases, stroke, brain damage, lower IQs among Chicagoans who mop floors, etc. This is simply false. I'll give you a sampling of the research, and again, all the relevant links will be on the right side, something mccainisthrough doesn't normally do, so people can't check out her statements. In a review article published in the Southern Medical Journal, this is in 2004, Keating and Donaldson of Queen Mary's School of Medicine and Dentistry at the University of London began the main body of their text with a clear declaration of the relative dangers of heat and cold when it comes to human mortality. Cold-related deaths are far more numerous, is what they said. Cold-related deaths are far more numerous than heat-related deaths in the United States, Europe, and almost all countries outside the tropics, and almost all of them are due to common illnesses that are increased by cold. So what are the mechanisms by which cold kills? Keating and Donaldson report that coronary and cerebral thrombosis account for about half of all cold-related deaths, and that respiratory diseases account for approximately half the rest. With respect to the first of these sets of problems, they say that cold stress causes an increase in arterial thrombosis because the blood becomes more concentrated and so more liable to clot during exposure to cold. The sequence of events as they describe it is that, quote, the body's first adjustment to cold stress is to shut down blood flow to the skin to conserve body heat, which produces an excess of blood in central parts of the body. And that to correct for this effect, salt and water moved out from the blood into tissue spaces, leaving behind increased levels of red cells, white cells, platelets, and fibrinogen that lead to increased viscosity of the blood and a greater risk of clotting. With respect to respiratory-related deaths, the British scientists report that the infections that cause them spread more readily in cold weather as people, quote, crowd together in poorly ventilated spaces when it is cold. There is very little truth to the higher temperatures bring more diseases diatribe. Lastly, let's go over climate change in Australia from the distant past. I already went over climate change in Canada, the Sahara, and China long before man had modern inventions. mccainisthrough has ignored that in her responses, obviously. Let's look at the Australia-New Zealand region. The following was reported in Global and Planetary Change 33. The authors report the results of the first millennium-length tree ring chronology for New Zealand. Derived from long-lived silver pine trees in the Oroko swamp on the west coast of South Island, the chronology provides a history of austral summer temperatures since 816 AD. The period of greatest confidence in the record begins at 1200 and ends at 1957, after which the instrumental record is used to extend the temperature history to 1999. No long-term trend was evident in the tree ring-derived austral summer temperature record over the entire length of the study, including the overlapping instrumental portion of the record that extends from 1866 to 1999. Hence, neither the tree ring data nor the actual temperature measurements from the area provide any support whatsoever for the climate alarmist claim of unprecedented warming over the last 100 years. In fact, say the authors, the reconstruction indicates that there have been several periods of above and below average temperature that have not been experienced in the 20th century, indicative